From Suez to the Straits of Hormuz. I'm Andrew Mortimer, and that's what we're talking about today, because the Straits of Hormuz look like they'll be very open soon, with an arrangement between the US and Iran having been agreed and all but signed. However, what does this tell us? Well, the fact of the matter is that this area of the world has been tricky since, well, before 3000 BC. So more than 5,000 years. Pharaoh Nama I amalgamated Upper and Lower Egypt into one kingdom. And from then on, there was a lot more competition and argument in the region of the Middle East, what we now call the Middle East. Now, there's too much history to go through, but Suez was a crisis in the 1950s, 1956 actually, 70 years ago. That got the British in difficulty when the Americans disagreed with what the British and the French and the Israelis wanted to do. The British, the French and the Israelis had a plan, but the Americans didn't want them to go along with it. Now the Straits of Hormuz and the deal that's come out in June of 2026, 70 years on, some people are saying, like Tucker Carlson, that it looks like another Suez crisis. Now I need to say a couple of things about this. Firstly, big powers, big empires don't falter on things like this. People have tried to say that Suez did cause that for the British. That's not true. The Second World War was very expensive for the British, and that depleted them to a large degree, but only into a period of abeyance, I think it's fair to say. The British are still nuclear armed, and they're on the Security Council. They're one of the big five. That's just the reality, whatever their critics might like to say about them. And it's interesting because when the Hittite king Shupalulima won a battle with the Egyptians and got a whole heap of Egyptian slaves who had the plague and made the Hittites ill as well, that knocked them for six, but it didn't wipe them out altogether. They came back under, I can't remember the Hittite king's name, Morsili or Mutaliash, or not Tutaliash. They had some funny names, the Hittite kings in the 13th century BC. But anyway, he fought a war with Ramses the Great, Ramses II of Egypt, which led to the Battle of Kadesh and then the Treaty of Kadesh, which now hangs in the United Nations because it was the first big peace treaty 3,300 years ago. So this region of the world has always created diplomatic and military problems because of its wealth and the fact that there's a lot of different cultures in proximity to one another. And that appears to be the issue here. But Britain and America are a long way away from the Middle East. So however Middle Eastern politics can affect the lives of specific politicians in Britain and America, like poor old Anthony Eden and maybe Donald Trump these days, the reality is that America and Britain are ultimately unscathed. They still exist and are still holding sway, doing what they're doing. That's the point. Whether what they're doing is imperial or as imperial as it was, that is for the commentariat, the chattering classes to discuss, but the reality of Britain and America is very much there. They're there with their armies, their economies, their seats on the Security Council, and their nuclear weapons, and such is the way of things. It's best not to over-reg these situations just because there's an academic class who, in some cases, likes to build mountains out of whatever comes their way. And the Suez Crisis and the Straits of Hormuz crisis, 70 years later, in 2026, are not as serious as they're being made out to be. And I think it behoves us to remember that.